So as hopefully everyone is aware, the really big highlight since the last meeting is that we shipped 4.0. So that's super exciting. And given the attendees, I think we probably all know how amazing that is. But it's really good. I can't sort of speak well enough about everything that Facebook put in and TrailBits put in, and I don't know, so many other people. So huge thanks to everyone. I didn't really pull any of the other highlights. I feel like mostly getting 4 out was kind of the really big one. If anyone wants to shout anything else out, I'm happy to write them down. But there's a lot in 401. And relatedly, 402 shipped, which a little embarrassing on all of us, but it's good. It's great. Anyone want to call out any other highlights?
Yeah, I guess it was mostly that for 402 and 1.
Yeah, it's huge. It's great. One of the items I wanted to throw in here was the Linux bug that we created. So when we shipped 401, we had accidentally broken the Linux builds, and some end user reported it to us, and then a bunch of us kind of debugged it, and some great fixes from Stefano and Alessandro on that. I feel like we talked about this a bunch on Slack, but I wanted to carve out a space in this meeting if anyone wanted to bring something up or talk about it or anything.
I'm not sure what was the... So I saw 2 different bugs. I guess one was the permissions on the executable, and the other one was related to the systemd script, which used to be pre-processed, but it was no longer the case, and that's why it broke. I'm not sure. Maybe Stefano knows more about this.
Yeah, especially with the systemd script?
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, okay. Yeah, it's simply something that has been left behind. Originally, the make Linux package script, the one that was used with old master, would substitute part of it so that it would install, it would search for the config file in the correct path. This has not been imported. Yep.
Yeah. I hate packaging.
I don't.
I hate packaging with CPAC.
Anyhow, so I don't know if there's much else to say. Like, we shipped a bug, and probably we need more tests. And Stefano, you were starting to work on bringing some of the old test framework back, right?
Yeah. So another set of tests we had was Python test that would, let's say, black box test Osquery and try various command line arguments, etc. These would have detected, for instance, the crash issue. So I'm restoring those.
Okay. Do you need any help? Do you want to hand that off? Are you happy working on it?
No, it's fine. I'm almost done.
Okay, cool. And thank you to whoever updated those bits. Okay, and anyone else want to say anything about the 401?
401 or 4.10?
Other than the extensions, what else isn't in there?
I'm sorry, that just got blurred together. I was saying, does anyone want to say anything else about the 401 release that turned out to be buggy before we move on?
I guess what is missing from that release that was in 3.3.1 or whatever?
I guess we pretty much have everything other than the test that Stefano is fixing, but they're based on the Python scripts we had.
Extension?
And
extensions, of course.
The ability to build extensions.
Yeah.
That's the part that's missing.
How about Windows?
Windows should work fine. We do have MSI package generation.
We removed the EC2 table, right?
I don't think so.
On Windows. It's one of the changes listed in the changelog.
Because it seems like it was linked, but never used.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was just a spec file mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, right now we are mostly. I think that the most pressing matters now are the extension SDK and finishing with the source layer of the dependencies, porting all the source-based submodules to Windows and macOS. Zach has already ported the SQLite 1 to the latest version because we only had this update on Linux, and it fixes a couple of CVE. So
and the great news is it basically didn't require any work at all. I mean, now with Stefano's comments, the PR is down to it's 9 added lines and 3 removed or something like that. So we're and I think that it's good to be establishing a pattern for migrating more of the packages towards source, and hopefully we'll be able to get everything there eventually.
I think we have a meta bug for that. I kind of remember opening one in one of these conversations. I think so. When we talked about this before, my recollection is we concluded that we didn't need to do all of the third-party migrations. Sorry, we were talking about this in the context of glibc 212. Right, so moving things to source should probably check them for glibc 212 support. Does that sound sort of right? Are those two linked?
I guess Stefano can talk more about this.
I'm not sure I did follow completely, meaning only Linux. Well, only Linux will be on Linux will be necessary to have that old glibc. And what we need to do, it's if we want to have support for older platforms, we need to test or regenerate the configs for those source dependencies and test them on that old platform.
Okay,
Were you talking about this? Sorry, I was a bit, I spaced out for a moment.
No, okay, so there are two things happening in third-party dependencies right now. One of them is that we want to ensure that the configuration files and everything works with the older glibc. The other thing that's happening is moving more of them into source and upgrading them. And those are sort of totally separate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the glibc work is only for Linux.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and Zach sort of banged out SQLite, which is pretty cool. And yay, one done.
Are we tracking those in an issue list or a checklist?
I don't think we have one for moving things to source. I don't know if it would help us to. I did make an issue for the glibc 212 stuff, which is currently part of the 410 milestone, but
I guess it will be useful to have.
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, this is important for two reasons. One is we want to be able to use the latest version of things, and two is that it would get us more independent from Facebook's resources. Are those the two reasons we're going with this? Okay.
What's the status of having a reproducible build? Are we still dependent on the build machines, or can I take the current Osquery build and create the same binary?
Not everything is totally static. There is actually an issue with the language here that disables some of the security measures, which we are considering whether or how to proceed. So,
yeah, well, it's not only the language, but yeah, okay, sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so whenever you link everything statically, you lose the ability to use the other space layout randomization on the binary.
Sorry,
So,
say that again.
Whenever you link everything statically, you lose the ability to use the address space layout randomization on the binary.
Yeah, I remember a bug about that now. So what is the theory for how we'll tackle this, or is this sort of just we'll think about it further into the future?
Yeah, we probably look into it, make an issue, a blueprint about it, and then we'll all decide together what to do.
Okay. Cool. So I guess another thing we should talk about is the general plans around a 4.1.0 release. When we talked about this a little while ago, we talked about it kind of just the theme of it being bringing extensions back. So I threw a bunch of appropriate looking tickets in, kind of just around extensions and around packaging and things like that. So I don't know if people want to talk about what we want to do in this, or just kind of like think about it and make some forward progress and then loop back, or I don't know.
There's a question in the notes here about what our cadence will be for releases. Right?
Oh yeah, it's another great question.
I think if we made twin goals of restoring extension support and resolving any issues that are outstanding with that, and the second thing being improve the packaging at least. I don't know if it'll be done. I don't know if we want to, just select a set of goals that are related to packaging, but the theme could be packaging and extensions, and I think that that's a reasonable, chunk of work. That if we limit that milestone to those two things, that it's a worthy milestone. I think it would be probably help us to think about a monthly cadence, but that's just my proposition. So at the end of every month we're able to get a release out. Maybe every other one is stable. That's just a suggestion.
So to think about release cadence, one of the things that we were muttering about on Slack was the idea of like, what do our release numbers mean? And I think that, we're a pretty mature project and we get an ongoing stream of bug fixes and table updates all the time. And I think, when I think about those, like I don't want a release plan for someone submitted us a table. I want to just be able to release a new table when we feel like it. So I sort of want to look at that and maybe say that, if we released monthly or every 2 months, we might just sort of try and stick to that cadence, and there'll be either a minor patch release for, someone submitted some bugs, there's a new table, we'll just cut a new thing off master. Or they might be a more major bug if we're like working on something big like extensions or packaging or, redoing the event subsystem.
So perhaps what we'll do is 4.1 in a pre-release state at the end of this month if we get some traction and towards our goals, and then a month long of integrating and patching and all of that, so that it's a release by the end of October instead of working into the last minute and then pushing out a release that we have to debug. Be more careful, I guess, is
I'm thinking. I feel like that's sort of orthogonal. Maybe like let's say we cut this release at the end of October, right? We're happy we have a fine release then. And then in November, someone says, "Oh, hey, here's a new table." We go, "Cool, it's a great table." We merge it. When would we cut a new release with that table in it?
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's our goals as the committee or whatever, and then there's contributions that could come randomly, and we want to integrate those.
Exactly.
If we had a packaging pipeline or something like nightly releases, then people could take advantage of those immediately. Like it'll be, like, I see what Seth is saying, and I think there's no harm in pushing out a new table in a release, but it's toilet to create a new release right now. So if you could push a button and say, here's an Osquery with this table, and so maybe punt on that while we work on better releases.
I ended up setting up a system that does some additional checks on the source while also pushing out nightly builds.
Nice.
It only supports deb and RPM, but I would like to add also like Windows and maybe macOS somehow.
What's the dependency for Mac? Is it that you need a machine to run builds on, or?
Yeah, probably, yeah. I see what I do. Maybe the service I am using now does have macOS virtual machines.
So I hear a couple of things. So I'm just sort of thinking about summarizing for the notes here, right? So I think we're talking about how do we think about release cadence? How do we think about releases that we are building towards, which are sort of feature driven or something? And how do we think about integrating tables, and random bug fixes from people? And group points out we have a huge amount of toil, so it's hard for us to do things at a really high cadence right now. That might change. And Alessandro is playing with some nightly build stuff. That kind of the stuff we're saying?
Yeah, so just for the packages, yeah.
I think Grub is right that until we sort of make the build and packaging a lot less toil-based, that it's going to be a little tough to do it. Which is part of why I think we should try and do that comparatively soon.
But we could, we could work on just binary releases in a tar file. I think that's a very achievable goal, right? So packaging releases, could be less frequent or whatever. At least for like nightly builds, there's no reason to, to build an RPM unless we're testing the, the RPM and repositories. A binary for each platform would be sufficient for people who actually want to be testing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, I've mentioned this elsewhere, but as a vendor, I don't use the Osquery packages. I just want the underlying binaries.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up with our packaging is that if we do invest a lot of work into them, then they have to be customizable by the user. Like if I want to add a third-party extension with my own flags or something, that should be a trivial change. Or like if I want to rename the service that Windows installs or whatever, I want to add post-install arguments. Like all of that stuff has to be customizable for the user. Otherwise, we're creating packages that people install in a default location and they don't really do anything because after you create the package, you still need to ship your own daemon and all that. So we could go the other route and have packages that only put the binary on disk and don't make any other decisions.
I wonder if we should poll our user base, like how many people use packages and what do they use them for? I guess given the number of people that complain that they were broken, there's probably a good number of people that do use the packages.
People rely on them, but I don't think they should. Like, that's the other thing is, like, we just released a major update, and there's commercial vendors that auto updated everybody and all that, and we have bugs where, you know, something broke because people also depend on the default packs, and so, like, we shipped a major update and we, you know, updated the queries in the packs, and all of that is bundled in, and then it's like, why are you depending on this? Like, why are we providing this?
Have you taken a look at the refactor proposal a couple of lines after the notes? We were planning on it is changing how CPAC works right now, making it standalone and also opt-in rather than opt-out. So by default, we'll just make install things whenever you want. We can also, I guess, change these to generate turbos without CPAC. Would this help out the packaging needs that a vendor would have?
So speaking as a vendor, you know, one of not that many, I guess.
The main one.
You know, I don't know if that's true, but I'm a vendor. I do all of Collide's packaging. We download the Osquery binaries and extract them out of the packages Osquery ships. And from there, I build them into my own MSIs, Debian packages, RPMs, Mac PKGs. So I have, as a vendor Collide, I have zero interest in anything that Osquery ships with CPAC. All I really want are binaries, ideally signed. And yeah, you know, as an Osquery member, I want us to ship whatever people want to use, and I want it to be relatively simple. But as a vendor, I just want binaries.
Well,
yeah, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you don't necessarily want the binaries. If there's a easy way to build it yourself and have a reproducible build, you might choose to do that. I feel like the reason we want the binaries is because, you know, nobody can quite build Osquery reliably by themselves, and you know that was also true, you know, as far back as you look. Like, every time I built Osquery, unless I was building it on the same machine over and over, the first time doing it was a major pain, and you couldn't do it in, you know, on a different system somewhere. And yeah, so if there's an easy way to say this is how you build Osquery and this is the SHA-256 you're going to get when you build this release using these flags, then, you know, there's no reason for a vendor to rely on your signature. They could sign it themselves, build it.
I kind of disagree. Again, speaking as a vendor, like, all of the build chain I do is in Go, and it's very cross-platform. So even if we had reproducible builds, the infrastructure investment that I would need to be able to build on Windows is very high. You know, it's the only dedicated, well, it's not totally true, but it's like, it would be a pretty serious dedication to Windows builds. I kind of think if you're a sufficiently large company, you know, like Groups and Player, it's probably a bit of a different thing. But I feel like, you know, at my scale, I don't really ever want to build Osquery for Windows. It just seems huge.
But to answer Alexander's question, yes, having just a tarball with the binary with a signed binary would go a long way for everybody.
Okay, so I think we haven't really resolved anything. I took a bunch of notes. People are following along, and I'll probably fill these in a little bit later. I don't know. I really like the idea of trying to get. I'm just going to say this again. I guess I like the idea of trying to get less toil-based releases so that we can make minor releases at reasonably high cadence. I would love to have monthly patch releases for whatever bug fixes have shown up.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I agree that it would be nice to have at least monthly patch releases.
Group, I was thinking, what about if we provided a way to set a hook on the make package so you could easily have your own packaging scripts integrated inside the build? Will that be helpful?
Maybe. I mean, it really depends on what you're doing. I see Steph's expression. I think he has something to say. It's just like, I've never, I helped set up the system that Steph was describing initially, and I found all the things that came with Osquery completely unusable because there was way too many things that we wanted to customize, so the package made no sense. Facebook ships with a specific identifier, which right now we're discussing because it's a dependency on actually shipping Osquery and not breaking people. But both as a vendor and as a sysadmin installing on my own fleet, I want to have complete control over the location of where Osquery goes and over the launch file that gets created and over the, the various properties that are set, the flags and so on. So it
would run in place of CPAC. It is not a hook that changes how CPAC works. We already agreed that CPAC will be disabled by default. So this hook will just call your script and let it do its thing and provide any kind of input parameter you need.
So I don't think that's a win for a lot of people. If you think about packaging, so if I tell you how I think about packaging, which is I think how CPAC works a bit under the hood, right? There's something that looks like a make install process that builds out an installation tree, right? It looks like a package root or a dester. And then something goes along and says, oh, I know how to call, FPM on this tree, or I know how to make a Wix profile and call it, or, oh, I know how to call package builder on OS X, right? It's basically just like a glorified shell script around, like 100 options in a build tree, right? But I ended up writing my own tooling for this because I didn't want to learn any of the existing ones, and I didn't find one that I liked enough. I looked at CPAC and said, these docs aren't good enough. I'm not going to run this myself. And I just wrote my own. And it looks kind of like a giant shell script, right? It's just in Go. And I think as a project, I'm not convinced we need to provide other people tool chains to build packages. I think that's a very big can of worms. I do that at Collide, and it works okay, but there's a lot of weird cases. So I feel like we probably shouldn't be aiming to provide people with the tool chain to build packages. We should be aiming to provide people with good source code, good binaries, and potentially good packages. And I think we need to sort of almost poll the users and see, do people want us to distribute packages? And if they want us to distribute packages, cool, we should distribute packages.
Well, the question is, what does the package do, right? Because if it just puts, Osquery binary on disk, that's fine. But if it puts Osquery on disk and launches systemd, then you have opinions about, what the systemd file is. So
I mean, I think
that's not going to work.
But we can iterate on that. And I think that sort of mechanics around do we have a hook on make package don't really matter. Right? If we ship a basic configuration file or a systemd unit and someone wants to change that systemd unit, I don't think we should provide them a really smooth way to package and get a resultant file. I think that use case will likely come with someone who either has the ability to repackage it or has enough configuration management that they can install our package and then fix their configuration file. Probably what I'd say is that we should ship things that don't start on default. Potentially don't ship config files.
I think that's gonna lead into more like support questions on Slack, because we have been shipping config files for a while. And even with the config files, people have like a ton of basic questions like, oh, how do I get this running? How do I get this up and started?
We don't ship them in Linux.
Oh, not on Linux. Yeah. I thought we did. Not sure. I'll have to go.
401 did not have one in the Debian package.
Not the 401. Previous ones.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I mean, one question is, why don't we ship one in Linux, but we do in the other ones? Is it because Linux users generally require more customization or some other oversight? So that's the first thing I'm thinking of. The other one is like, how do we communicate changes to users when we ship a new major release? You know, with so many people relying on the repo updating their entire fleet, you know, Ada shouldn't be doing that, but they are. So how do we tell them that the next version is going to break them, and what's the appropriate way of dealing with that?
So part of why I'm kind of against shipping config files is I think that how people use Osquery is very different. Like which things people want to enable, I think is very site-specific, or should be very site-specific. Ditto where you want logs to go and what you do with them. You know, if you think about any SIEM systems, like who really expects to just install one and have it like fit in with their world? I don't know. I don't understand the use case of someone who just wants to get Osquery D and have it run magically and do like, what do they want to get out of it? I'm confused.
You can maybe ship the example configuration file under USR, maybe as a reference.
I'm 100% behind shipping things in a documentation directory. Anyway, does anyone want to advocate for shipping a config file that starts on boot? Charbel, you were starting to maybe say that you thought we'd see more support requests if we dropped it.
Yeah, because sometimes I just see a ton of repeated messages on Slack, and I was like, maybe we should have like an FAQ, like, hey, you know, this is a sample config file. Here's how you get bootstrapped and up and running. Especially people that don't have in-house IT or in-house management for smaller teams. I've done like some work for like smaller companies that do not really have a lot of bandwidth or the engineering resources to get manage that.
Yeah, I think that this came up under the criteria for the infrastructure initiative checklist, where one of them was have a quick start guide. And we really ought to have a quick start guide for small to medium deployments.
But what does that look like? I mean, the biggest problem with Osquery isn't necessarily Osquery, it's all the log management, right? So
yeah, well, it doesn't have to solve people's problems, but it has to tell them what the problems they need to solve are.
That's a good call out, Mike.
And yeah, maybe just give an example of this is like one particular way of doing things that should get you at least like off the ground.
I have a question about the daemon startup. I noticed that at least on Ubuntu, whenever you install like the SSH server, by default, it is started and enabled. Is that something done by apt, or the package itself has been configured to do so?
Almost certainly the package itself.
I see.
Without digging through the code, it's been a while since I've had to stare at this. The common model for a lot of the Debian world is to install things that are toggleable by the configuration file, etc default, whatever, or by their own configuration file. And then you might switch that. So for example, SSHD probably ships an etc default SSH that comes enabled equals true. And that's going to be flagged as a config file. So as a site, if you toggle that, that's false. SSH is at this point kind of a de facto standard, so that feels reasonable to me. One of the things that we might do for Osquery that would feel okay to me would be to ship no configuration file, ship example configuration files, and ship a systemd unit that says, if there's no configuration file, don't start Osquery.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Right? So you have kind of an implicit gate there, and then a site can install whatever they want, kind of have a go. I don't know, maybe we should sort of chew on this and then like put up some blueprints or circle back to it or something. Can we loop back to 4.10 briefly? So I think we have a milestone. We think we should work on some bugs. I'm going to suggest that end of September is pretty soon, and that maybe we target like a pre-release around end of October.
We can maybe release 4.03 with the patch made by Zach for SQLite.
Is that important for us to get out sooner?
It is going to solve the CVE issue that are affecting Windows and macOS.
So my worry
it depends on the usage of installation.
So my worry there is that cutting a release still has a fair bit of toil. There's a lot of work involved in it. So I'm sort of loath to cut a release too often. I guess it's a little up to Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see those changes get out, and I just think that we need to see if we can get the Facebook folks to do that, and perhaps asking them to cut a release when we have a good reason like this, because it's mitigating CVEs that result in privilege escalation in Osquery. Perhaps doing that will help motivate them to help us build a release system that will require less toil on their part. So I don't know.
I don't think we need their help. Might be wrong.
We don't need their help to build that system.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. We need to do it.
Yes.
One last thing about sorry, I'm jumping around, about the plain binaries. We do support the TGZ output, so we would be able to output a tarball already with the current system. And we can enable it if you want.
That'd be cool.
That'd be nice, yeah.
Sounds like we don't have a clear date for what we want on 4.10 yet, or whether we're going to ship a 4.03. Secular work merged to trunk, right?
You're talking about the fix to
the SQLite.
The SQLite. No, it's not merged yet. I addressed the comments, and perhaps someone could take a look at that after this meeting.
Do you want to talk about CPAC, Alessandro?
Yeah, well, I guess I already addressed everything. We are going to make this optional.
Before we talk about packaging, because it's going to eat up the rest of our conversation, I wonder if we can talk about the 2 other issues on the list.
Yeah, sure.
There was a GitHub permissions.
I'll give you a quick update on the GitHub one. So the GitHub one's a little bit sprawling. We'd like to start getting some more GitHub issues. We'd like to start getting some more GitHub permissions. The sort of one of the drivers here is that we'd really love to be able to give Mike Myers the ability to sort of triage and do some more stuff. Somewhat that seems tied up in what our GitHub plan is. We're on an old legacy plan, which probably doesn't really get a lot of the updates anymore. We also would like to update our GitHub plan to something current. Both Teddy and I reached out to GitHub about 8 days ago, I think, a little bit more than that. And we haven't heard anything back yet. So I'm going to try and poke GitHub again, see if I have any contacts there. But mostly I feel a little bit blocked on GitHub right now.
Is that because the repo got moved from Facebook's?
No, Facebook's paying for it. We're paying for a bronze level plan, but the bronze level plan is a legacy plan, and I don't think we get new features with that. So some of the permissions we want are considered new features. Or there's just a weird bug where like the triage role doesn't appear in our repositories, but that's also a GitHub support question. So either way, we're going through GitHub.
Could you cancel the current plan and then resubscribe?
The current plan is no longer offered, so we could talk about canceling the current plan. I don't know what we would subscribe to. I don't know that the free plan is what we want, and I don't know what the paid plan would work out to in terms of cost. If we get too fed up, we could just grant some more people committer rights and assume that code owners will kind of cover the permission side there. But I feel like I really would love to get an answer out of GitHub. I don't know. How do other people feel? Are we kind of impatient enough that we should just grant some more people committer rights and go from there?
With Mike's specific case, I see no reason not to. I mean, other than on principle. It seems like a good practical decision, especially if he's going to be doing triaging of bugs and labeling things.
Okay, so
yeah, yeah. I mean, not an issue to me. I mean, we're granting permission to a trusted person to do work that's helpful, and I think that we should absolutely move forward with that, and hopefully we can get the answer from GitHub and move forward with to make sure that we have the right decision on which plan we should be using and what features we need enabled as we go forward.
Okay, let me summarize that. I think we just said that 1, we should keep working with GitHub to figure out what correct is, and 2, we should grant Mike committer access as a interim measure to let him do work, because we would love to have his work. And perhaps we will revisit that if GitHub ever figures out what we should be doing differently. Does that sound right to everyone?
Yep, sounds right to me.
Okay, and I will probably wait a little while in case anyone feels like they're opposed but isn't comfortable speaking up in a meeting or something. So feel free to hit me up in Slack, or probably Zach or Victor. I'll volunteer you too as well if anyone wants to object quietly.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I mean, I think the plan's good.
Okay, I will write that into our notes. Victor, you added this keyboard events tabs?
Yeah, so I wanted to just get Alex's thoughts on it. I was trying reading into it, and I couldn't figure out if this was based on discussion, if this was a regression that we need to fix, and basically, like, should this be labeled as a bug and investigated in Osquery, or is this just a query, something that people are relying on a query they shouldn't be?
All right, this is Alex. My guess is that it's just based on configuration. He's using a pack that is committed into the repo, and he's just using it as is. and some things show up with event taps, and he can easily change the query to filter those out. Then I ran the 3.3.1 version of Osquery on my system and found that I have some system process doing it.
Okay. Do you know if the query has changed, like from the previous release to this one, or what I'm getting at? Did the Osquery source trigger the changes that they're seeing, or was it because somebody updated the query that we ship in the packs and they're using the query as is?
I'm not sure if it's changed.
Okay, I'll take a look. Thanks.
Yeah, it's the first time I looked at that query. We haven't been using it here. But I did notice it's not the most efficient query, so we should, if we're going to spend time on it, might as well fix it.
Well, that's a common trend with a lot of the queries that ship in the packs. They are mostly examples, and they're often wrong and all that, and people insist on using them. So I don't know. Like the one that I noticed like a year ago, and I don't know if it's still fixed, is that none of the browser extensions do cross joins, and they should be. And I've pointed it out in Slack before, but I'm also telling people not to use the default packs, and well, to use them as examples for creating your own rather than running them all.
Yeah, this probably goes back to the other conversation about configurations, and maybe they should be more more documentation than actual, hey, use these.
I feel like I might suggest that if we don't think the packs are suitable for running, we should take them out of shipped packs and make them examples or query exchange items or something. Like if we actually ship a configuration, people will run it.
Agreed, and we would have to support it on Slack and whatever.
Yeah, it feels like an endorsement to have them in the repo.
Not that we have anywhere else to keep them right now, but I might suggest that once we have somewhere else to put them, we maybe move a bunch of the packs. I don't know. Will that like annoy a lot of people though?
You mentioned the
probably.
Query. That's not a bad idea. Give somebody an incentive to make something like this, where the queries are vetted and useful.
Well, I don't care if they're vetted. I just want them not to be shipped as part of Osquery.
Just as an idea, it sounds like the Query Hub thing kind of got put on pause because I know Tony went on vacation. It's kind of like an extra big project to take on. Is there any really low effort way to make just a database of these things in the meantime?
My guess is that, it boils down to who's volunteering, right? If someone wants to volunteer to, then there is a low effort way to do it. Alternately, we could basically move them all into the documentation, right? Moving everything into the docs is a relatively low effort way to stop shipping a query pack.
Is moving them into the docs viable from an implementation perspective for someone who's running Osquery?
I think anywhere we move them is going to impact people who are using those packs in production, right? Because we're basically, I'm suggesting that we stop shipping things that we don't think are good, and if there are people who are relying on those things, then those people will be impacted.
We should consider using the blog for announcements when we make any change that might be impacting.
Speaking of which, did the blog announce our latest release?
Oh.
No, I don't think it did.
Were there things specific to the keyboard event taps that we still wanted to talk about or resolve? not just sort of.
I'll follow up, and I was just, since Alex did some triage and I was reading up on the issue before the meeting, I wanted to see if it was a Osquery regression or a patch config change. So I'll find that out. We can label it appropriately either way. If it's just a pack change, I think it's appropriate to say it's an example and people need to be monitoring them if they rely on them.
Yeah, it was added in January 2019. The event tab.
There are a few comments on that pull request when that example was merged. Someone else commented that it will generate like a lot of system processes as well. So yeah, I think it's not a perfect example, and it's just an example that could help someone detect a keylogger or something.
So wait, is they're opening a bug about a query that was just recently added, not changed or anything?
The query was added a long time ago, but I think they just started noticing false positive. That's my take on it.
Okay, I see the date is January 15. It's recent because there's not a lot of changes there.
And it was in the experimental branch, so this is the first release, I guess.
Okay, I'll comment.
So, quick question: how do I get access to Query Hub that's mentioned in the agenda? Is that a thing yet, or?
It's not a real thing, which is why I laugh a little bit about it.
Oh, you're talking about the carbon black site, right?
So there's a couple of different things that have come up. In the 2018 QueryCon, right? 2018? The 2018 QueryCon, there was general interest in creating a website for people to share queries through. That never really happened. It's been a thing that lots of people want, so different people have sort of played with different versions of it. Carbon Black created a thing that they called Query Exchange, which they demoed a bit at the last QueryCon. Their Query Exchange is basically a statically generated website of queries, community distributed. And talking about with Tanya from there, she was pretty on board to just shoving it all into a repo. There's also the RHQ thing from Recon InfoSec, which I stuck in these notes as well. So roughly, Query Hub is an idea that hopefully someone would like to own. And I think MVPs of it don't really have to be a fancy website. It's certainly a conversation about just having it be a repo of useful queries.
Makes sense.
And whether it evolves into being a fancy looking website or not is a different thing.
They did upload the website. I didn't see it. It's not easily searchable though.
Which Query Exchange?
Yeah, the one I just linked, which I didn't know it existed.
Yes, that thing. Yeah, my understanding is that's a static generation from a spreadsheet on Tanya's laptop.
From a Excel file.
Potentially a Google Doc spreadsheet, I don't know.
So it's 2 p.m. Do we want to talk about CPAC?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of mentioned everything I wanted to say about it. So we're going to make it standalone. So it is kind of detached from the main project. It is opt-in. By default, the make install will stay there as usual. So you can use the prefix and the des there. And yeah, I was thinking about the make package hook because I thought it might come in useful. For example, when we create packages, we do have metadata like the specific version that has been set by the user, which may or may not be detected by the current tag, or maybe other things as well. But yeah, if it is not useful, we can skip that.
So when you say make it standalone, what does that mean?
So right now, it is always brought in inside the main project. We can refactor this, make it more tidier, nicer, while also making it optional.
I think what I mean by that is like, can you walk me through what does building Osquery look like? What does building a package look like? What are the inputs and outputs?
So there's quite some boilerplate for each package, which are settings you have to set on CPAC. Once these are prepared, then you would just use the usual install directive in the CMake, which right now is inside the packaging file, but usually that is not the case. It's usually inside the main project, and the CPAC is separate.
So moving it to standalone would mean that the install target moves to the main CPAC, main CMake files.
Yeah.
Presumably this honors Dester, right?
Yeah.
And then what is like if you wanted to make make a PKG or an RPM, what does that look like? Do I start with source code, or do I start with like the binaries that were output from the previous stage?
Right now, as it is, it works with the source code.
Right, I'm asking about your proposed refactor.
Yeah, we can look into it, making it multi-stage. I think Stefano went with the source base for time constraints. I remember you did add some support for. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. What were you saying? Sorry.
I remember you were considering the idea. I'm sure how much it was implemented.
Okay. So yeah, just to clarify, I hope so. Right now, actually, the packaging.cmake, it's not CPAC. It's just an extension. You can look at an extension of CMake. So, and CPAC can be used in multiple ways. The way we use it is setting all the configs inside a CMake file script, and then calling CPAC. CPAC will use those variables thanks to the integration with CMake. Though CPAC has also the ability to run its own config script, which means that you can run CPAC totally separate, detached from any Osquery CMake source code, etc. Meaning you can give it a binary, a folder with binaries, GZ, and have it create your package. It needs its own script, which have to tell it what to do, but still it's totally separate, because CPAC, it's actually a separate module. It just have integration with CMake. So the idea here to make it standalone, and actually you can have both. You can have the part that it is needed to make it integrated with CMake, so that when you run make package and you enable CPAC, you build and also create the package. But you can also decide to have Osquery output a binary, and then later call CPAC and create a package through CPAC if you like. So it's, yeah, both are possible.
So when you say refactoring, you're basically extracting the CPAC configuration to make it easier to just run CPAC and on some binaries and get some output.
Yeah. Again, right now all the configs are in the CMake files, which are evaluated only once. Instead, I already use this. There is a CPAC config.in.cmake file, which is actually run every time CPAC is called. So you can move everything there. And so that enables CPAC to be run totally standalone, because CPAC would automatically call that script to set the configs, and you wouldn't need any CMake to tell him what to do. So, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know CPAC very well. CPAC seems to be a very black box-ish system. Like from where I sit, I can't understand what it's doing for package signing or how I would enable notarization on it or things like that. How confident are you that CPAC actually supports the things that we might want going forward?
Yeah, I think, in fact, that's a good question, meaning that what's supported is what they give you, because obviously it's a C++ implement binary. So, I mean...
So I have a question about that. It seems like that if there's a gap or something missing in what CPAC can do or invoke, that there's always a script, like a post-run script So if you needed something done that it didn't do, you could do it at this last opportunity in this shell script, it seems like. Is that right?
I do not think, well,
There's like a post something script that you can...
Some things you need to do before a build. Like if you were code signing, you need to code sign the inner thing and the outer thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a pre-build and a post-build script. At least it seemed like. I don't know. I did one evening of research yesterday. But
so I did rewrite Senta in CMake, and I was able to implement signing for all the inner parts. So it is doable.
That's a good example.
You can always do pretty much everything. Depends on how much you want to use external tools, of course.
So what I understand about CPAC is that it doesn't do much on its own. It invokes things that are native on the system to do most of the functionality. So really what we're asking is, can it proxy these requests to such tools, you know? And I guess if there's an ability that's lacking there, you know, you could create a CPAC generator yourself or file a GitHub issue on CPAC. But it seems to me like functionality is mostly still exists in the system tools that it's invoking. So the benefit of CPAC is that you can specify your requirements more generically, and then most of it can be relayed to the tools without having to have a script that, you know, sets up these tools and invocations yourself. Is that pretty much the benefit of CPAC?
Yeah, in general, yeah, it's the integration with CMake and the ability to retrieve informations from CMake, as you've said, and also in general, it's a tool that can be run standalone. So that's another plus among the integration with CMake.
But it is a wrapper, right? Primarily,
it is a wrapper, yeah. So on the one hand, you have. So I believe that some of the default it uses are, for instance, good defaults. So you don't have to do much work. You don't have to dig too much. You have less possibility of doing something wrong, and you avoid shelling your own solution every time. Again, that might not be the best for everyone, and especially if we need to. If we only had CPAC and we need to do a lot of customization, yes, that might be an issue. It does have some variables it gives you. So, for instance, a variable to add some files inside the package itself, more than the one that were present when installing. But yeah, not all the package generators are born equal. So that might differ a bit. In general, CPAC has been chosen due to the integration, due to the easiness of retrieving the information we need from the build system we already have.
Yeah, better documenting the CPAC value or the CPAC workflow, how to debug it, how to extend it. These are things that we could do to make it less of a black box for the team and for the future maintainers. Should we take that on as a task?
I think I'm not super worried, honestly. Any packaging system is fundamentally just wrappers around native tools, and our ability to move from one to another matters to me. And like if we decided, yes, let's ditch CPAC, I think we could replace it in relatively short order with some bash scripts, if nothing else. So I don't know if we need like really extensive documentation. We probably want some amount of docs for the things of like, we set this to achieve this goal because it's subtle.
My concern was this, and why I brought it up initially, is that I know how the native packaging tooling works and I can make it work, but to build an Osquery package, now I have to dig through 50 layers of abstraction on top of the native stuff that makes no sense. You know, like if this was a bash script, I could go read it top to bottom and see, okay, this is where you're calling this flag, you know, in product build, and this is where you're putting the Wix script and whatever. But instead, it's something indecipherable. And it's unfair. It's unfair to have this criticism because, really it's somebody's going to own the code and make changes. So, if the current team that's doing it is the team that is working with CMake, and so it makes sense to have the same tool for both. But I wanted to call it out because it's also a blocker for other people who might want to contribute and don't know. They have to learn this whole new build system just to create an MSI file.
I tend to agree.
I'm sorry, who was talking?
Sorry, that was me, Alex. I agree with Groove in that we already have our own native packaging system. The CPAC might be a little easier long term, but and it depends on how deep we want to do our packaging, and if we're not going to include configs, really, what's our package going to do?
Well, it's going to put a signed binary on disk. And I think that's the other thing is like if we simplify what the packages do, and we don't put a lot of configuration on them, then dealing with this build system is fine because it's going to do a very minimal set of things.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Aren't those two different things? Meaning, what we ship inside the package doesn't matter. I mean, it's not connected to which package system we are using.
Well, it only matters in the sense that we want to use the tools, right? So today, if I want to help out with an issue or make some customizations to the packaging, there's a very high barrier of entry for somebody who is not a C++ developer, who is not familiar with CPAC and is not using it in their daily workflow. So it's just something to be called out. I don't know that it needs to be fixed, right? Because it's you guys who own the code and make the changes. It's just that if you want to hand it off in the future or have other people contribute, it's going to be very hard to do because people will be intimidated by this. So
we are in theory using standard CMake, so whoever knows CMake should be able to change CPAC.
I mean,
we should probably, I would like to. I mentioned the hook because maybe there is a way to provide some kind of integration between the standard packaging tool that we have there and the packaging tool that could be used by anyone else. So for example, if Alex were to tell me that his packaging tool requires some specific information, like which files go where or which files are included in the build, we can work in making sure that the hook becomes an API interface that we can provide in a stable way. But I'm not sure if it makes sense because I'm not particularly experienced with packaging. So it may just be stupid.
Yeah, and I guess we need it for automated testing. If we're just going to have some smoke tests, we need some way to install it. But is there a way we can just say, all right, we're going to generate signed binaries, just the Osquery D, and then packaging's up to you. We've got this unofficial packaging we use for our automated testing.
why wouldn't you use the signed binary for the automated testing?
No, we are, but I'm saying we are not delivering official packages. We're delivering binaries only.
No, that's great. I understood that part. But I meant, why does the test system need packages at all?
Well, because you need to install configs and flags files and all that stuff.
But I mean, you're testing iterations. Like I wouldn't want to If I imagined a testing system, I want to just pull the binaries down and generate the config that I'm testing.
That's fine.
I don't know, it goes back to this other question, like, do the users of Osquery derive value from the packages we ship, and what packages do we want to ship to them?
I remember hearing a lot of people ask about the MSI package in the Slack. So there's one that people really like.
And I think it's about like a batteries included approach. Like you have a package, you kind of have everything that goes with it. But
So I would say, and this is, I'll float an idea as I take some other notes. We are using CPAC today. Not all of us like it. That's okay. I think seeing a lightweight refactor would be valuable, because I think splitting make and like make tarball as like a default thing, and then having like CPAC there to kind of make other things would be valuable. But I don't know if it's worth days and days of effort, because I don't know, this is like sort of an open question, right? Like, I don't really know if we know what we want in all of our packages. I don't really know if we want to stay committed to CPAC. I think it's worth using it now because we're already using it, but I don't know if it's worth, like a week of heavy CPAC work. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's heavy work. It seems like we can satisfy some of the immediate stuff now, like the desire for a tarball. That's like an hour of work, it seems like, for somebody who knows where to edit the script. And then refactoring it in order to improve maintainability is also a short amount of work. And I think you're right. It works. Let's rely on it until we discover a requirement that it can't fulfill for sure. Then we can start a discussion on whether to extend it, augment it, or replace it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing this means is, right, you're less likely to get packaging work from Gruberi, but that doesn't sound like a blocking issue to me.
Yeah, well, not a blocking issue, but let's make sure your needs are met though, with whatever we know, so that we can maintain peace on this.
Well, the ironic thing is that the needs for both of us are satisfied by a tarball.
Yeah, so it's an easy, quick one. I mean, we discussed macOS signing, which we know we can do. We've done it before.
Well, that's probably not important to me or Grub, because both of us can sign our own binary.
But it's another thing for us as a project to try to automate some of that.
Yeah, signing and notarizing the binary is something that the project should be doing. I think signing the package is something different, but
yeah, we need
arguably for shipping a package, we should sign it. But
yeah, Grub, you found some software a little while ago that was about making signing servers that I wanted to stare at. It looked like it was only about signing packages, not binaries, so it probably needs to be patched. But
yeah, for macOS, code signing requires that you have a Mac, because they do a secure timestamp. So not only do you need a Mac, you also need it connected to the internet or have the correct ACLs to talk to Apple servers.
I suspect that, I don't know, we'll have to talk through it. I don't know if we want to set up like a signing server or just sort of set up a pipeline where, binaries go into some bucket, which then things get pulled out of and signed.
I have another meeting in 5 minutes. How many things do we need to discuss?
But that was everything on the agenda, plus, an extra 20 minutes of packaging discussion.
Yeah, Zach was right. Or no, it was Grub that said that. Okay.
I'll put up the minutes in a PR, and I will figure out the right way to get my permissions. Thank you all for the meeting and for all the hard work people do.
You too. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.
See you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.